I'm not rich anymore. I was almost rich, bitch. Should have took that money. Now I'm in a basement in London somewhere. Standing underneath the air conditioner. Not allowed to smoke and shit.
That was 2007. And since then, a lot has changed. Dave Chappelle is anything but poor now. With multiple Netflix specials under his belt, we're not talking about success, we're talking about millions. And that matters because the Dave Chappelle we're watching today isn't the same guy from that clip. He's older, wealthier, and far more established. In his latest special, he doesn't hide that. He openly calls himself a capitalist. That's his word, not mine.
Watching The Unstoppable feels less like watching a stand-up special and more like sitting across from someone older, wealthier, and untouchable while they recount how the world really works. Not explaining it, not arguing it, recounting it. The tone isn't urgency or rebellion anymore, it's certainty. Dave Chappelle sounds like someone who has already won and is now telling stories from the other side of the door. Early on, he makes the pivot explicit. He says, plainly, that he's a capitalist. He talks about owning large parts of his Ohio hometown, properties, buildings, even a fire station he turned into a comedy club. And he doesn't frame this as community service or redistribution. He frames it as ownership, control, power.
But you know what I learned about liberal white people? Liberal white people let black people do whatever the fuck they want until you buy most of their town. Oh, they frowned on that. Them whites got real suspicious. But you know what? I don't blame them. Because, no, for real, because look, if I was white and the people in this town were black, you know what they'd say? They would say I was gentrifying the town. I own so much property in this town, and this is true. These white people think I'm responsible for their well-being. That's ridiculous. I'm not no public servant. I'm a capitalist. I be walking down the street minding my own business, and they come up to me with their concerns. Dave, congratulations on buying the whole goddamn town. But you need to start thinking about some affordable housing around here. And I'll be like, well, actually, champ, I can afford my house.
When he speaks dismissively about social housing, it's not cruel, but it's revealing. It's the perspective of someone who no longer sees himself as part of the systems meant to catch people when they fall. He's not mocking poverty, he's simply no longer inside it. That distance is new, and it matters. This is the moment where Chappelle stops sounding like a voice of the people and starts sounding like a voice of stability. Not justice, stability. Someone who benefits from things staying mostly the way they are, with minor adjustments at the edges. It doesn't make him dishonest, it makes him institutional. He's no longer critiquing power from below, he's explaining it from within. That shift becomes sharper when he talks about Saudi Arabia. Chappelle is unrepentant about performing at the Riyadh Comedy Festival, and he doesn't soften the stance for liberal audiences. When Bill Maher criticizes comedians for doing shows in Saudi Arabia, Chappelle's response is blunt and unfiltered. F that guy.
I've been getting a lot of grief, again, because I did a comedy festival in Saudi Arabia. And you hear those cheers? That's black people. America's whites, they're furious. Boy, I gotta tell you something. I've never not felt guilty about something like I've never felt. I don't feel guilty at all. You know, and Bill Maher, the famous comedian, I've known Bill since I was like 18, 19 years old, and I've never said this publicly, but that guy. I'm so tired tired of this little smug cracker ass commentary. These motherfuckers act like because I did a comedy festival in Saudi Arabia, I somehow betrayed my principles. Well, no, I know I didn't, I know.
There's no attempt to engage the ethical argument, no concession, just dismissal. What's revealing isn't the profanity. Chappelle has always used that language. It's the confidence behind it. Earlier in his career, Chappelle would have unpacked the contradiction, circled it, turned it into a moral knot. Here, he shuts it down. The message isn't, you're wrong, it's, you don't get to judge me.
They said, well, Saudi Arabia killed a journalist, and rest in peace, Jamal Khashoggi. I'm sorry that he got murdered in such a heinous fashion. But, and no buts, like, you know, period, and also, I mean, look, bro, Israel's killed 240 journalists in the last 3 months, so I didn't know y'all was still counting.
The statistic lands, and it's not inaccurate, but rhetorically, it functions as whataboutism. Instead of addressing Saudi Arabia's repression directly, he reframes the issue as selective outrage. Others are worse, therefore, this criticism is hollow. It's a power argument, not a moral one. There's also an unspoken alignment. Chappelle is Muslim, and while that doesn't invalidate anything he says, it contextualizes the ease with which he dismisses Western criticism of a Muslim country. The defense feels less like neutral analysis and more like identification. Again, not deceptive, just situated. This isn't a man weighing ethics in the abstract. It's a man choosing sides in a world he understands as hostile and uneven. That same posture shows up when he talks about Sean Diddy Combs. Chappelle doesn't approach the subject with outrage or condemnation. He approaches it with familiarity.
I was on stage not long ago in the States, and niggas got mad because I said, well, you know, maybe Puff will get off. And I said, I hope so. And the crowd was like, boo. Okay, look, it's not that I think Puff is right, but when I got attacked in LA at the Hollywood Bowl, people forget Puff was the guy that tackled my attacker. He saved my life. It's hard to be mad at after that. I had security that night, but you know what I mean? Them niggas they just wasn't ready. Them niggas had some slippery shoes on or something. They ran out. All them niggas slipped and fell. And Puffy got my attacker and tackled him. And then years later, when I heard about that baby oil, I was like, what did those niggas slip on? 1,000 bottles of baby oil, that's a lie. But remember, he wasn't on trial for having 1,000 bottles of baby oil because it's not a crime to have 1,000 bottles of baby oil. It's gross. It's not illegal.
He jokes about baby oil. He jokes about having been to Diddy's house. He references proximity, access, insider knowledge. When he makes a crude joke brushing up against the Cassie situation, humiliation, bodily degradation, it lands not as shock comedy, but as indifference. The notable thing isn't the joke itself, it's what he refuses to do around it. He doesn't distance himself. He doesn't moralize. He doesn't pretend ignorance. He simply lets the anecdote sit there as if to say, this is the world powerful people inhabit. Take it or leave it. As the special moves toward its close, the structure loosens further. Jokes give way to references. Jack Johnson, Martin Luther King Jr., John McCain, Stevie Wonder. These names aren't woven into a clean argument. They're stacked like memory markers. Chappelle isn't constructing a thesis. He's recounting a lineage. That's where the conspiratorial tone creeps in, not through explicit claims, but through implication, surveillance, delayed punishment, the idea that powerful black figures are watched for decades before consequences arrive.
Jack Johnson was the first black heavyweight champion of the world. And the heavyweight championship, to this day, is the most prestigious title in sports. But in 1908, Only white fighters had that distinction. Not because black fighters weren't good enough, but because no white fighter would give any black person the opportunity to lay their hands on them. And a guy named Tommy Burns became heavyweight champion. And Tommy Burns was an anomaly. He was Canadian. And he said, I am the heavyweight champion of the world. He's Canadian. You know how, faggy they are. He was like, he said, I am not the champion of Canada. I am not the champion of white men. I am the heavyweight champion of the world. And I will defend my championship against all comers. And boy, Jack Johnson got the opportunity to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world, not from an American like he was, but from a Canadian.
He gestures at hip-hop policing, at long timelines, at inevitability. He brushes against contemporary figures like Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens as symbols of how dissent and outrage become content machines. At moments, it feels less like evidence and more like worldview. Truth tellers always pay a price. Everyone gets got eventually, except him.
Got that Bill Cosby. It's not gonna give me much time.
By the end, it's clear that The Unstoppable isn't a free speech manifesto. It's a status report. Chappelle isn't fighting institutions anymore. He's navigating them, negotiating with them, explaining how they work once you own land, own venues, own leverage, and no longer fear exclusion. The controversy isn't any single joke or line. It's the realization that Dave Chappelle no longer needs approval, absolution, or consensus. He's not speaking truth to power. He's speaking from it.